Hey guys, it's Jeff. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. So I'm really excited to do this review, but I'm really nervous all at the same time because this book is one of the best books that I have ever read in my life. Second best book that I've ever read, right behind House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. I mean, it's close, guys. It's really close. And House of Leaves has been my favorite book for over a decade. So this one, oh man, there's so much content in here. Like holy world building. For anyone that's read it, like, are you kidding me? This is an incredibly rich world with like amazing characters that are interesting, and there's so much lore that goes into the history of all the myths and the legends that go into this book. It's just wonderful. And although very tiring, because it took me a long time to read it, because it comes in at like 650 pages. I could really only read maybe like 20 pages at a time, because since there's so much content in here, it was a little bit mentally draining for me. But Rothfuss, the world that Rothfuss has created, he just doesn't leave anything out. And if he does leave things out, it's on purpose, because it's like every line that Rothfuss writes there's no wasted space in this book at all, like ever. Every line that he writes has a purpose, has an intention, and he leaves nothing out. Okay. And I'm probably going to be glancing to my notes a lot, so please forgive me. But there's just so much to talk about, and I don't want to make the video too long, but I don't want to leave anything out either. So please forgive me, because I've got my notes right here. It starts off with the main narrator of the book, Kvothe. He's an innkeeper at the Waystone Inn. He's an adult and just lives a real simple, just regular life, calm, doesn't want to cause any trouble with anybody, and wants to stay, keep to himself, basically, other than his coworkers and the people that he's teaching. Okay. One day, a guy named Chronicler comes in, notices that Kvothe looks really familiar, and recognizes him and says, you're who I think you are, basically. Okay, sorry. I can't talk today. You're who I think you are. Because Kvothe is a man of legend who has this incredible reputation and mythology and heroism in his past. But Kvothe wants to stay secluded and doesn't want anybody to realize who he is. So he goes by Coat, I believe, and gets really nervous when anyone says his name around him, because he knows obviously who he is, but doesn't, for some reason that we don't fully know yet, because there's 3 books in this series, but by the end of the first book, we don't exactly know what it is that happened to him that he wants to stay secretive. But Chronicler comes in and says, I am a guy who writes histories about people, about famous things, and I want your story written down. And at first, Kvothe is very hesitant, because he's never told anyone his full life story before, but ends up, after 2 or 3 days, I believe, giving Chronicler a chance. And he says, if you can keep up with me, then I will let you write my story down, but I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop for you or anybody else. If I'm going to stop, it's because of me, because I need a break or whatever. And at first I was like, why would this man of legend be so like scared when other people would say his name, but then be willing to give Chronicler a chance to tell his story? And I think it's just because the way like Chronicler's attitude is, and his like demeanor, and he doesn't seem intent on harming anybody, or Kvothe especially. And Kvothe gets very impressed with the way that Chronicler's shorthand works, the way that he writes. He can basically keep up writing as fast as someone is speaking. And I think that's what kind of does it. It's just his overall demeanor and how impressive chronicler seems to Kvothe. So this book being book one, Kvothe says that I'm going to need 3 full days to tell my story. Okay. Day one is book one. Day two is book two. And then day three is book three, which was just announced for an August 2020 release. So this entire book is just 1 day of Kvothe telling chronicler his entire life story from ages around 9 to 15. So it starts off with him telling chronicler that he was part of a very famous, very well-renowned acting troupe, like performing troupe called the Ademaru, and his parents were part of it, and he's been traveling and been on the road his entire life up until this point, up until the book starts at age 9, and Kvothe is an incredible musician, a lute player, an incredible actor, which both benefit him greatly later on in the story. Everybody in his troupe he considers family, and they're his best friends, and he absolutely loves this life. There's nothing about it that he doesn't like. He loves going from town to town, being able to put on performances for people. It's his life, and he doesn't want anything to change about it. But it does. No spoilers here because it happens kind of early on in the story. Along one day when he's traveling to a city, they come across a guy named Abenthi, or Ben for short, as he calls him. And he's an arcanist. And Kvothe accidentally, or is spying on him or something, and sees him call the name of the wind, which is, the title of the book, calls the name of the wind to get out of a sticky situation, right? Ben calls the name of the wind, and the wind obeys him to scare off these guys that are trying to cause Ben harm. And Kvothe saw that, and he's like, yeah, I want to be able to do that. That's pretty cool. So he approaches Ben. Ben becomes his teacher in basic, I don't know what the word is, arcanism, and teaches him simple things like, healing potions, using materials around you to, like healing materials, and teaching you things about like nature and how things work and how they're bonded together and things, chemistry, they're the form of magic in this world, which is really, really interesting. It's so complex, called sympathy, and then there's sigildry, and I don't remember what sigildry was at the moment, but they're kind of, I think they're kind of intertwined. But the magic system is really complex because it's not like Harry Potter where you have a wand and you say a spell and then something happens. There's a lot more like science-based stuff that goes into it. You have to bond things together, and that's called their sympathetic link. So if you were to try to, let's say, like connect a rock and a horse together for some reason, whatever. Horses and rocks don't share any, similarities at all. And it might end up costing you more energy to try to do whatever sympathy that you were trying to do, rather than just physically like going to pick the rock up and like putting it on top of the horse or something like that, So the weaker the sympathetic link between two things, the more energy it requires. So it makes more sense to try to bond like things together. And only really intelligent and really clever people can really master the magic in this world, which Kvothe is obviously very clever and intelligent. So he picks up on it much faster than other people can, sometimes to his own arrogance and cockiness, and makes mistakes and, sometimes almost kills himself doing it. But that's one of his flaws, is that he knows that he's better than everybody else, sometimes tries to exceed their expectations of him, and then, he lands himself into a world of trouble doing that. But the one of the reasons why this is so dangerous and you have to be incredibly intelligent to do it is because sometimes you have to split your mind into two. I have to connect this side of my mind to this piece of magic, and then this part of my mind to this piece of magic, and then combine them together. So, the common person can't split their mind into two and think of two different things at the same time. So Ben tells him and tells his parents, like, he is really clever for his age. He needs to go to the university called the university to continue his learning because he could probably be one of the best arcanists in the world very much sooner than you would think. So, while this is happening, Kvothe goes away for a couple hours. And then when he gets back to his troop, he realizes that everybody's been slaughtered. And by this point, Ben is gone. Ben's not hurt, but Ben is, gone on his way. And Kvothe sees that his parents are slaughtered. All of his friends are gone. and sees a group of people who are like dark magicians, and they just disappear into this like black cloud of like not smoke, but just of darkness, of shadow, and they end up disappearing. And he knows who they are, but he didn't think that they were real. The Chandrian, it's a group of 7 people in lore, in myth, but nobody ever actually believes that they're real. But now Kvothe knows that they're real and spends his time trying to get to the university, learn about the Chandrian, and ultimately try to learn the name of the wind, because that's what he's been kind of obsessed about. So two main things that he tries to do are learn more about the Chandrian and how they are who they are, and then to learn the name of the wind. So what's really great is that, it's a very like mature fantasy book. He gets to the university and all the characters are likable. His friends, Willem and Simon, and the like main antagonist of the book, Ambrose, like you love to hate him. He's, even all the characters that you want to hate, like you like to hate them, and you kind of end up liking them anyway. And as I was reading this book, I'm like, all right, so there doesn't seem to be a lot of like, aha, triumphant, like giant climactic moments. And I'm like, and that's because there are a lot of small climactic moments that give you just this like deep sense of satisfaction that you get inside of Kvothe's mind, and you're so satisfied that he's able to carry out all of his cleverness in the way that he does. Like my 2 favorite like triumphant moments are when Kvothe gets his pipes from from performing at the place. So now that he can make money on a weekly basis, because he spent from ages 9 to 12 homeless in the streets of Tarbian, and was struggling for money on a daily basis just to be able to, he only had like 1 pair of clothes. He would live on the roof somewhere, and all of his belongings were just in one small pile, and he had to pickpocket people and steal things where he could. And he learned the city very well, knowing what places you can pickpocket and which places are not so safe to do that. So at the age of 12, he finally has enough money and, decides, like, I'm going to go to university. So he's always constantly struggling for money to upkeep his tuition for next semester or this semester, or room and board, or just to buy food and stuff. So that was really triumphant. I really love that magical moment when he gets done playing that really complex song and everybody's, like almost speechless, like, wow, that was really incredible. The other one being when he's in one of his basic classes that everybody else is like diligently taking notes on, and he's just sitting there bored because Ben has taught him all this already, and he approaches his professor and he goes, this class, like, I don't really think I need to be in this class. It's kind of boring. I'm like way more advanced than this. And the next day in the class, the professor goes up. He's like, all right, Kvothe's going to teach the class today. And everybody kind of looks at him. He's like, all right, fine. So he gets up, teaches the class, makes it entertaining, and because he's he was part of that a Demaru troupe, he knows how to put on a performance. So he's very like characterized and very, kind of almost like an actor. Okay, this is what we're going to do now. This is, here we go. And makes it almost like a show and puts the professor in his place. And he's basically like gives him the finger and says, all right, here, you want me to show off to the class? Here we go. Or you want me to teach the class? Here we go. I'll show you how good I am. And almost to the point of almost injuring the professor, because he's like, all right, I've got everybody on their seats and now they're taking notes and they're laughing. And this is another point where his cockiness gets him in trouble, because he is so good, but at the expense of trying to like belittle other people and being like, you don't believe I can do it? Fine, I'll show you how good I am, and gets himself in a lot of trouble, ends up getting punished a lot because of how much he, like how many times that he does this. And he's always in front of the professors trying to explain himself and doesn't want to, like, seem like he's helpless at all, but doesn't want to like rat anybody out, and you can see him working through his process. If I tell on him, then everyone's going to think that I'm a weakling, and so that type of thing is really it's really fun to see. Now, at first I thought that Kvothe's character was a little bit too perfect, because he does excel at everything that he does, and like quite literally is better than everybody else in his age group. And I was like, he almost seems a little bit too perfect of a character. But I was watching another Name of the Wind review channel, Thoughts on Tomes, and she was saying, yeah, since he's telling this story, of course he's going to make himself be as good of the best version of himself that he can be, because that's the way that he sees himself. And I was like, that's the answer that I was looking for. I'm like, it almost seemed too good to be true that Rothfuss would create this entire world and then create a character that's like too perfect and almost like wins at everything that he does. But that's because we have to remember that Kvothe is the one telling this story about himself. And of course, everybody perceives themselves in the best version that they think that they, as they picture themselves. So yes, it would make sense for him to be as good as these things as he can. So that was one thing that was really interesting. There was also it was a little strange to, and it's not a big part of the book, but when Kvothe is telling his story, like, obviously, like, fantasy books and books of like similar genres are all going to have similar tropes and similar ideas and characteristics that makes them a fantasy book or a mystery book or a whatever kind of book. And it almost felt like Rothfuss was using Kvothe to say, because when Kvothe is telling Chronicler, all right, so this is a story, and what does a story need? It needs a hero, and guess who that hero is? Me. And now we're to this part of the story. Guess what every story needs? It needs a love interest, and it needs a woman. And here comes Denna, and like, obviously he's not saying it as like comical as I'm saying it, but he's saying it like, all right, we're at the part of the story where, a hero needs to come in, and we're a part of the story where the love interest comes in. And it was like, didn't really need to like point that out, I think. If I would have read through that, I wouldn't have given it a second thought and be like, oh, this is too tropey. Like, oh, what, like, oh, there's a love interest. Like, what? Excuse me? Like every book has that, but it felt like he was using Kvothe to try to like justify why he was putting those tropes in there. I didn't really feel like that was completely necessary. And there was like, this book is kind of a slow burn, but not a boring slow burn. Like, it's not like, the hills aren't like this throughout this book. It's very kind of like this, and although it's kind of a slow burn, it really keeps your interest the entire time. It doesn't really slow down at all. The only part that I would say it kind of slowed down for me that didn't really feel in place was when Kvothe and Denna at the very end are investigating another report of the Chandrian, and they go into the forest, and they come across that Dracus, the dragon. That whole sequence felt like it was a little too long and didn't seem like it fit in really. It just felt a little I don't know, maybe Rothfuss wrote that scene really early on before he started the rest of the book, and then tried to fit it in at the end or something. It's the part of the book where Denna and Kvothe spend the most time together, and they kind of, they bond a little bit. But so maybe that was the intention of it, but the whole scene just felt like it was a little bit out of place, and it felt like too much of every other fantasy book that came in, oh, there's a dragon all of a sudden. It's I don't know if that book needed to throw that in there, because there's so much, everything else is so rich, and yes, there are weird creatures that exist in the book, but it felt a little too forced or something, and a little too out of place for me. But so overall, this book absolutely deserves every point of its 5 out of 5 score. The next time you go to the bookstore and you walk past this book, don't walk past it. Back up, take it off the shelf, bring it up to the register, and buy it, because you are not going to be disappointed. I can't wait to start book 2, even though it's going to take me forever to read, because it's so long. This one, this one's 650 pages. That one's I think 1,000 pages. So it's going to take a long time. But it's one of those books where you just you get so wrapped up in everything about it, and it's it's just really refreshing to have a book like that, come out in this day and age. And it's really awesome. So I would highly 100%, 1,000% recommend that you guys buy this. Thanks so much for watching this book review. Subscribe, like the video if you want. Really appreciate it. It helps out so much. I'll see you guys in the next book review video. Peace.